Very much.
And it shows that it's recording. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the session for the 4th Digital Transformation in Government Conference that we're holding. And I'm Bob Wiseman, the chair, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome Eric Sweden from the National Association of State CIOs. He's a program director for enterprise architecture and governance. He's going to be talking about the state information management, information technology priorities. And just to make Eric understand is that virtually all especially the data officers have been emphasizing the need for enterprise architecture and they achieve digital transformation. So without further ado, when you're talking about Eric has been around in with the NASCIO now for how many years? I can't recall. But
this is my 21st year I'm starting here, Bob.
Oh, wow.
It's unbelievable.
It goes by quickly when you're having fun, eh?
Yeah, it does.
That sort of thing. So anyways, he's been a font of knowledge to us, and he's spoken at previous conferences, and he's been able to provide some incredibly good work. The digital transformation, by the way, in NASCIO started in 2021. And anyways, however, I'm sure that we'll listen to it. He's had more than 40 years experience in senior technical and management positions within IT, business, public, and occupational health. So he's got really excellent experience in business architecture, information architecture, business process enhancement, and strategy development. And he's held a variety of technical and managerial roles in chemical manufacturing and telecommunications corporations. And he's been serving the state CIO community for 20 years. He's a great author. He's published a fantastic number of white papers and thought articles, and he's really into the forefront of thought leadership in areas such as enterprise architecture, IT governance, records management, digital preservation, information sharing, organizational transformation, business intelligence, analytics, cloud computing, cyber disruption, response planning, government transparency, blockchain, and multi-sourcing, just to name a few. Okay, he holds an MBA from the Carlson School of Management, University of Minnesota, and a Master's of Science from the School of Public Health, University of Michigan. He's also a certified government chief information officer program, which he passed with honors. So without further ado, I turn the presentation over to Eric, and over to you. And thank you ever so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to present.
Glad to be here, Bob. Always glad to be partnered with you. You know, based on all that introduction, I got to tell you, I'm still learning, as are all of you, and we're learning from each other. As was mentioned, Bob described us as the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. That's the 50 states. And right now, 3 territories within the United States are members of NASCIO. And our association is in place to serve those state CIOs as they are indeed serving their governors and their individual states and territories. Service and mission-oriented are key themes for all of us at NASCIO. This is something that Bob's seen before, and I think I showed this last year as well, Bob. It's holding up. I created this a long time ago, and you'll see it reappear and reappear again and again in many of our publications. But you know, being an enterprise architect, you tend to think big thoughts. You try to understand, you know, at an abstract level, what's really going on. And sometimes I'll describe the enterprise architecture role as the ultimate MBA. They are looking at the entire enterprise and outside the enterprise. And this is kind of one way to look at it. Okay, this set of value chains. First, within a contextual environment, what's going on in the world? And that's ever changing, always changing. So we've got to keep an eye on that environmental context. And then within that, we're looking at many different opportunities, many needs, and we have to make choices. We can't do everything, particularly in state government. We have to prioritize based on some set of criteria. But once we decide to work on something, even while we're making our decisions, new needs, new opportunities keep arriving because that environmental context keeps changing. Once we make a choice, we have to have very clear intent. And that includes more and more emphasis today on ethics and accountability. And then we enable that intent with a variety of capabilities. And I've added a few to this slide, Bob, just for this year. AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, metaverse, identity management. I mean, the list is endless, but these are some examples of what do we mean when we say capability. Capabilities enable intent. We have to have clear intent. Whatever we do, we've got to have a clear business case that describes that intent. And that's within a context that's ever changing. So even projects, programs, management initiatives that are in flight, they have to continually be defended. Is this still the right thing to do? So every year, Doug Robinson, our executive director, and I, we do a ballot to our state CIOs, and we ask them, we present them with sometimes 35, 40 things and say, pick 5. And this year for 2023, we're seeing these are the priorities. And some of the things seem to persist year after year. One is cybersecurity. But I want you to notice several things that we're going to touch on in this presentation. And there's so much we could talk about relative to digital government. We're going to talk about some things. We're certainly not going to cover everything. But priority 2, digital government, digital services. In fact, we have a president's initiative this year on citizen experience. And what have we learned over the last 20 years? You know, we did a video back in 2001 on digital government, and I presented the link to that in last year's presentation. If you viewed that video today, you'd think it was done yesterday. I mean, it's just so relevant. So we've been working on digital government, digital services for a long time. Workforce is an issue because even as things are advancing, we have to keep up skills. We have to continue to have capabilities within our people. Legacy modernization is a big challenge because we have so much invested in systems that are built on old code, old methods. Some of them are holding up, but some aren't. Identity access management. If you look at most roadmaps I've seen, at least relative to digital transformation, one of the very first steps is, can I clearly identify who's coming in on my portal? You know, is this Bob Wiseman? Or do we know for sure and for certain this is Bob? So identity access management is a big challenge for us. Cloud services, we can't deliver everything ourselves anymore. And we're relying on external partners, and that's typically through cloud services. Thus, our whole initiative on CIO as broker, or the changing CIO operating model. Data and information management, it's become even more important. It always has been important, but the role of the chief data officer, chief analytics officer is clearly being more and more emphasized. That number 10 there, customer relationship management, well, citizen relationship management, okay? We're here in place to serve our citizens. We remember who's paying the bill, who's the boss, our citizens. Now, we have 2 top 10 lists. This is the strategy list that gets most of the attention. But there's a second list we do, and that's on technologies, applications, and tools. Look what's at the top. Identity access management, legacy application, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to go through all this, but the point is these 2 lists support each other. They're consistent. There's cross verification. Looking at just general trends, like what's going on in state government? Well, we've had certainly fiscal impacts from this whole pandemic mess. This has been, you talk about pathologies, this whole thing has been a huge mess for all of us, and it's expensive. And we've got grant funding that we've got to manage that's come to the states. These are a couple of them. They're just major funding streams. We are also looking, as I mentioned earlier, at the CIO's broker or new state CIO business model. The state CIO is moving more and more into a managed services model, and also more and more to the role of a business advisor. So you'll see a lot of our state CIOs are attorneys, they're accountants, engineers, certainly still computer science majors and that kind of thing, but these are business leaders, they're policymakers, and they have an emerging role that's more and more advisor. We have agencies calling some of our state CIOs and saying, hey, we've just got an idea. We don't even know what we're going to do with it, but we want to talk to you about it. And the state CIO is becoming a very significant advisor on strategy. Certainly elevated cyber threats. We're all moving to digital government more and more and more. Well, the bad guys are taking advantage of this. We've lost, I should say, over $100 billion in fraudulent unemployment was stolen from the United States during this pandemic. So, this has just gotten huge. Then we've got the 5 R's related to workforce, recruiting, retaining, reskilling. All of these things are extremely challenging right now for state government, getting people to come to state government. The last one I put in here, I put in bold because it's most relevant to your conference, focusing on digital government services, particularly improved citizen experience. So when you come into state government, are we remembering who you are? Are we requiring you to know how we're organized? We shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to know how state government is organized in order to get the services you need. In fact, in some cases, states are talking about automatically enrolling people in services they need once they understand their circumstance. So how would you describe the role of the state CIO? Has a voice in state agency strategy and strategic initiatives. 80% responded that way. And I've seen this in some of our states where, as I stated earlier, agencies may just have an idea, and that's all it is. And they'll come in and talk to the state CIO to get advice. How would we proceed? What do we need to be thinking about? And I'm going to show you a list of things later that I think have to be relevant to be considered in any business case. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So how are we organized? When we look at how large some of our state governments are, I mean, they're like Fortune 100 companies in some cases. How do you manage all of the investment? And I'm going to bring up a point about mission control and the importance of enterprise portfolio management. Well, centralized IT project management, program management is becoming essential to that kind of thing, to avoid redundant investment, to make sure we have simplified the portfolio. The more complex it is, the more difficult it is to defend. So here's the top 5 business processes or investment practices that are going to persist as we get past this pandemic circumstance. Okay, so increased attention to digital government. Notice these 5 things. They were the same 5 priorities in 2022, 2021, 2020. They just shifted. And how much did they shift? I couldn't even tell you how many votes each of these got, but top 5 is top 5. So attention to digital government services, citizen experience. What's the experience of our citizens when they're encountering their state government, either needing services or maybe even volunteering? So increased priority in terms of investment in legacy modernization. The technical debt kind of holds us back a bit. And certainly investments in broadband expansion. Why do we need that? As we move into digital government, our citizens have to be able to access the digital services. So we've got to have broadband capability. They got to be able to reach us. Expanded work from home. I don't know that we're ever going to see people go back to buildings and cubicles and that kind of thing. We have some of that, but I don't think we're ever going back. And with that, there's this parallel situations like this. The platform that Bob and I are using here, collaboration platforms, remote meetings. And I think we're getting more and more used to these things, more and more capable in effectively using them without muting each other. And how many times you get on one of these sessions, hey, you're muted, well, okay, now I'm unmuted and now we can proceed. But, we're getting better and better at it. A lot of this detail came out of our 2022 State CIO Annual Survey. This was one statement from one of our CIOs: workforce is absolutely at top of list. How do we bring people into state government? How do we keep them motivated? We'd like to see them come in. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So besides compensation, what actions can we take? One of the things we have to do, particularly with digital services, a new kind of set of skills. Oftentimes we're seeing, as we're outsourcing and we're bringing in more closer relationships with our corporate partners to deliver capabilities, we have to have skills in contract management, vendor management. How do you manage these complex invoices with reserved instances and many other things that are part of a very complex financial model? So the cost accounting skills are very essential, and you'll see things, new methodologies coming out for trying to manage that costing. Certainly aligning job titles. I mean, we've had this issue is just so persistent, is job descriptions, classifications, even evaluating resumes that come in. We're still not effective at that. And part of it is we have to move our HR practices to move up to the times. And it's been an ongoing issue just with recruiting. It takes so long to recruit people. Flexible work schedules, certainly. But the other thing is we're understanding we can't keep people in state government. So we're going into these pipelines from community colleges, technical schools, even high schools. Some states are not requiring a degree. We just want to be able to train you. But look at the difference here from 2019 to 2022. 71% are using these talent pipelines. And what we're promising is we'll give you the skills, we'll give you the training. Stay 2 years, stay for a little while, so you can serve your state, serve your territory, and we know you'll get attracted away by the corporate world. We know that'll happen. We just accept it. But we're seeing in some cases, students are coming in and getting that training, and they feel loyal to their state. They say, gee, I got all these skills. I'm going to stay right here. And so that happens too. So we're very glad about that. Call to public service. This is very important, particularly across NASCIO. We're here to serve our government, not the other way around. We're looking for people who are interested in mission, in doing something relative to their fellow citizens, serving their fellow citizens. This is a big deal, and it's effective. We've got a lot of young people who are motivated this way, and we really look for them and we want to keep them. Certainly, I mentioned modifying job prerequisites. Do you need a degree? Maybe not, okay? So as we look at some of the challenges we're facing relative to digital services, we've addressed this: workforce, skills, capability constraints to deliver, implement digital services. That's the highest priority right now for state government. Second is organizational readiness, and then funding, budgets. And here's our favorite topic: data and information quality, analytics, absolutely critical. And then the willingness to take risks. But look at that last one, 22%. Citizen expectations exceed organizational capabilities. Now, 22% out of 50 states, that's about, that's something like 10, 12 states, something like that. But it's very significant. Which states are they? If it's California, New York, Texas, that's a pretty big deal. But obviously, we're seeing more and more of this kind of a challenge is meeting citizen expectations. Some states are creating what are called personas to try to understand and make sure that they are empathizing, understanding, and certainly reacting to the demands from our citizens. So as we're looking at approaches and solutions, I highlighted these things in the middle. The first one there, use technology for personalized citizen experience. Personas come into play there. Integrated design thinking. Right now, we're doing a President's Initiative on Citizen Experience. And as we're interviewing our state CIOs, more and more of them are employing human-centered design. I put a few more things on here too. Journey mapping, focus groups with citizens. They have hired an experience officer. Some of them are called chief experience officer. So this is certainly getting more and more emphasis. Not every state, but quite a few are pursuing this notion of citizen experience. You know, we did a report a few years ago as well on business relationship management, and we discussed the notion of business relationship management ecosystems, and that's managing all the relationships with agencies, citizens, vendors, corporate partners, legislators, whoever. And this certainly fits with the themes of business relationship management. So one of the issues that we are continuing to deal with, and now with digital government, it becomes even more important because we're relying on digital services. Well, that comes as a challenge relative to maintaining a secure environment that our citizens can trust. So what's on the rise? Foreign state-sponsored espionage. You know, I just mentioned what was stolen from our country during the pandemic relative to unemployment, fraudulent claims. Unbelievable magnitude in theft. So as we look at our CISOs, our chief information security officers, we do a survey of them every other year. And this is a comparative between 2020 and 2022. Malware, ransomware is at the top. And notice it's even more important as a consideration and concern. Phishing, farming, certainly that's still up there, but malware and ransomware are the biggest worries for our state CISOs. That's the report down there, 2022 Deloitte NASCIO Cybersecurity Study. By the way, all of our reports you can pull from our website, and there's no charge. And you'll see reports out there, webcasts, conference sessions, our top 10, our surveys. It's all out there, and you can download them at will. So as I mentioned earlier, the new operating model for state CIOs, more and more reliance on our corporate partners. Well, that brings risk. And in these cases where we bring in capabilities from outside, in a way, we're inheriting their risks. And so we asked our CISOs, well, how confident are you about some of these third parties and what risks we're taking on? Well, you look at 4% are extremely confident in third-party capabilities. That's pretty low. Very confident, 17%. Somewhat confident, 62%. I mean, we don't have a huge level of confidence in capabilities of outside parties, but that's where a collision comes in, because we have to rely on them. We don't have the capacity to be able to deliver all of the capabilities that are necessary to actually implement digital government and the services that our citizens are demanding. So it's a collision. So cyber talent, what are our barriers? You know, we talk about workforce in general, but among all the various roles in state government, certainly security is our highest challenge. And part of it is the pure inability to hire people. They're just not available. So we're continuing to struggle with this inadequate availability, lack of sufficient budget, inadequate staffing. And so, of course, that builds vulnerability to state government. So this is an ongoing issue. We haven't solved it yet. We're trying these pipeline ideas. We're trying training for service, that kind of thing. So we continue to explore and experiment with ways to try to build on this need for more cybersecurity people. Now, 60% of our CISOs report gaps in competencies. Why? Because actually we have to be moving with the trends in digital government, and it's going faster than we can keep up with. Certainly more responsibilities, increased sophistication of the threats. And so we're relying on more and more analytics. We published a report some years ago. Bob mentioned it, the Cyber Disruption Response Planning Guide, and we published along with that advanced cyber analytics. So we can't hire people to be able to handle the volume of security issues. So much of this is getting automated. And you can pull that report as well and see more detail on it. So as we look at where states are focusing their cyber efforts, risk assessments are clearly at a high priority. And by the way, risk assessments have to be ongoing. It's not a one-time thing. And I'm going to say risk assessments have to be ongoing with any new thing, digital government or metaverse, whatever we're bringing in, we have to conduct risk assessments that are dynamic. So we have to continually assess the risk because they keep changing. So cyber trends, certainly an expanding attack surface, services, remote work, bringing in more and more partners to help deliver capabilities, that expands our footprint, that expands our attack surface. Supply chain management risks certainly are challenges for us. And by the way, we're providing support to local governments because they are in huge need for assistance relative to addressing cybersecurity and actually managing cybersecurity events. The talent crisis we just talked about, recruitment, retention, compensation. Now, all of this, everything we've talked about, this all boils down to the state CIO mission control. Like I put a diagram in a report that we did some years ago. It was titled Destination Enterprise Portfolio Management, First Port of Call or First Stop, the Issues Portfolio. Everything starts with an issue, a problem or an opportunity. And in that report, I put this picture of a mission control. It could be for NASA, whatever. But the point is, we have ongoing, very dynamic environment of projects, programs, management initiatives, abstract up IT investments in organization as well. And how do you manage this? You've got to have a very disciplined, mature enterprise portfolio management in place. The report you see on the right there, that's the cover for a report we just published this year on enterprise portfolio management. And it's a playbook. We'd conducted 4 webinars with state CIOs on enterprise portfolio management. And they brought in their enterprise portfolio managers, directors, and we talked about where they are, where they want to go. And we discussed what are these portfolios? One of the most complex portfolios is the cloud portfolio. From our Accenture report on cloud last year, year before, I think it was, we found there's some states have as many as 99 cloud providers. Well, how do you manage all those clouds? And how do you decide which cloud you're going to leverage for a particular project, program, management initiative? You know, that takes a lot of criteria, evaluation to decide, well, which path are we going to go in? Well, this whole concept of enterprise portfolio management is becoming more and more critical, particularly with digital services. So you'll see here, we've got a ways to go. Within central IT organizations, it's mandated across 68% of our states and territories, optional 28%. Now, this is not balanced. You know, with this is, if it's optional, is it even going to be done? You know, so this has to change. We have to be able to implement discipline in managing the huge investment portfolios that we have at state government. So I'm looking forward to this changing in future. This is from our 2022 Annual State CIO Survey. And then how are states using their portfolios? I mentioned a few things, but it's a critical mission control capability. Optimizing, rationalizing investment. Looking at capacity. What could we actually do? Understanding what are critical systems, what needs to be backed up, what needs to have fast switchover. Looking at reducing redundancy in investment. Part of the business case Any business case should look at, well, where else have we invested in something similar? And should we be expanding on those existing investments versus a brand new one? And then performance tracking for projects. How's a project doing? And can we ensure we don't have project failure? Let's use early intervention. So let's find practices to catch where things are going south fast and early and make changes. So the other part of the complete portfolio, and by the way, I'm going to break away from this for just a minute. I want to show you something else. In that report, this is the report right here titled, I'll give you the cover right here. Hang on. Here is the cover. Yeah. Destination, Advancing Enterprise Portfolio Management. First stop, the issues management. Okay. What are all the issues? And this diagram here kind of sort of led to our CIO as broker. Here's the state CIO in the middle. Here's all the demand on the left. Here's the continuing growing flow of capabilities coming from industry, state government, elsewhere. And we're trying to map those together. What capabilities do we leverage to deliver those needs, keeping in mind mission number one, our citizens. That's who we're here to serve. Citizen outcomes. So then I put this picture in here. I hope you appreciate it. This is mission control right there, okay? But how many portfolios are there? This is a few of them. But in fact, when this discipline matures, you know, we're talking about policies, mandates, technologies, best practices, data sharing agreements, our data models, opportunities, risks, you know, all of this, these are all portfolios within the portfolio. So let's go back to the slide deck here. So as we're looking at the applications, we teamed up with VMware on a project last year, and we asked this question. So what percent of your applications are in need of modernization? I highlighted the right because, in fact, these are the states, and notice over on the left is number of respondents. So those red boxes there, that's something like 10 plus 8, 18. That's something like, you know, 22 of the 50 states, 3 territories, are saying 51 to 60% of our application portfolio needs to be modernized. 71 to 80% needs to be modernized. That is a big deal. That is a huge investment. And again, getting back to enterprise portfolio management, we need to be able to carefully evaluate, where do we go first? What are we going to redo first? What are we going to put aside and maybe let it come to its full end of its life cycle? And what are the drivers for some of this modernization? You could see them there on the left. I just highlighted them. Watching our clock here, Bob. So those are some of the drivers. And then what are their approaches? Now this I put in here because I'm curious about this myself. States are using, some people have 5 R's, some have 7 R's. I put 5 R's here. Rehost, refactor, replatform, rebuild, replace. But notice we have 24% of our respondents use replatforming and rehosting and refactoring. So the question is, well, when do you do one or the other? And is there a sequencing? Do you do them in sequence? So we need to understand more about that. How do we carefully manage these application portfolios? Top challenges for this particular portfolio, certainly funding. Agency resistance to change. That's a big deal. Lack of enterprise insight. Now, we can promote this and we continue to do this, try to get our agencies to think whole of state, not just your agency, not just your swim lane. Think of the entire state, because it's the entire state government that is providing service. And the others you can see there, cybersecurity, certainly. So now, relative to digital government, we talked about workforce, we talked about the new CIO operating model, CIO as broker. But on any roadmap that I've looked at, and maybe there's others that have a difference, but identity management shows up as step one. How do we identify? I know this is Bob Wiseman for sure and for certain. Okay, so this is absolutely the number one priority. And we're working on it. And I'm going to tell you, we don't have a clear answer yet. So if we look across enterprise identity access management, not individual agency identity access management, but whole of state, you could see we have a ways to go. You know, we've moved a little bit in terms of fully implemented. Boy, we've got so far to go here. I'm going to show you some things we're thinking about. And then even relative to the citizen, again, a long ways to go in terms of establishing discipline here. What's the status of the digital mobile driver's license? That's one approach. And we're not sure it can really scale. Maybe it can, maybe it can't, but we're evaluating that right now. Can you use a mobile driver's license? Well, think about what was the original purpose of a driver's license. It's you have the ability, you've proven you've got the ability and the capability to operate a motorized vehicle. It was never intended to be this major identifier. Now, I put this slide in here for this reason. So identity access management, as we're trying to address this, we have to have a discipline. And the way I put it, a discipline for addressing new things, whatever it is. On the whiteboard for identity management, we've got to have principles, governance, trust, ethics, some of these other things. You know, what else should be on the whiteboard? But then I started to think about, well, any new thing, what do we have to have? We've got to have a business case. We've got to have an economic defense. We have to have a sponsorship. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What functions are impacted? We need a risk assessment, and that risk assessment has to be dynamic. Ethics. How are we treating the information our citizens have entrusted us with? How are we treating our citizens? Governance, decision rights. Who's got a decision right on a particular issue? Accountability. We, government, our policymakers, our elected officials, have to prove they are accountable. They have to prove they're doing what citizens ask them to do. Continuity of operations. How do we continue in the case of a disaster? Resiliency is a key theme for us this year as well. How do we scale? Workforce training. I mean, these are a few things, but there's more. So any new thing, it takes some analysis. How are we going to manage it? And I put an emphasis here. Are we controlling the technology or is it controlling us? James Martin put together the 21st century school at Oxford some years ago, and he was asking that question. When do we have to start being concerned about technology and properly managing? You know, within engineering, you always have statistical process control and bounding, making sure things stay within limits. We have to do the same thing with any new thing. And here's one of those new things: metaverse, virtual reality. This is actually a wonderful tool to enable digital government and being able to understand, yes, I know who this citizen is, I understand their circumstance, and I can, in fact, provide them a better service because I'm already anticipating what they need. However, we've got to manage it so that we're making the decisions, not the technology. Here's another good report for you, by the way, from Deloitte on metaverse. But I think all those things I mentioned, particularly ethics, accountability, those become extremely important here. Now, relative to AI, metaverse, here's what we said in this report we did with IBM and Center for Digital Government. Clear framework for governance, defined vision, understanding of vendor capabilities. This is a start, but it's a partial list from that longer list. So I've covered a lot of information here, Bob. Looking to the future, you know, I put this question at the bottom. What else is already here or emerging? You know, that's part of the exciting part of our jobs is nothing stays the same. We are always advancing on some new adventure. So with that, here's a few of our reports. Download at will, and we can move to questions, Bob.
Great. Well, thank you very much for a super presentation. It was greatly appreciated. Now remember, for attendees, just use the Q&A button, and then you can basically pop questions in. It works quite well. First question. They really like the metrics that you were using. And then I just want to reiterate that we're going to be providing the presentation in PDF format afterwards, probably within 24 hours. We already have it loaded. It's just a function of making it live on the web. Okay, for that. The second one, 99 cloud providers. Are the software as a service being counted in that number, or only
Yes.
platform as a service?
It's actually covering all of those various deployment models. That was just a simple question. We only asked how many clouds are you implementing? Now, interesting. Let me break away to another report here. So bear with me here. I am going to pull something up to help answer that question, and try to get you to download that report from. See if I can get back. Looks like I'm on desktop. Let's go to NASCIO here. So we did a report. This is our resource center. And you'll see our reports here. And in years past, we did this report, a fresh look, capitals in the clouds. And you'll see in here, we actually asked the question, what deployment models are you using? And it depends on what agency you're in, but all of them were represented here. Let's see if this will come up. A little slow here. But you'll see, my, here we go. There, look at this. How would you relate the adoption across agencies? Now you'll see platform as a service, infrastructure, software as a service. That's a survey of that adoption, okay? I hope that answers, but download this report for more details. Bob, back to you.
Yeah, I would highly recommend the resource center over at the National Association of CIOs. That's NASCIO.org, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
NASCIO.org, and then go to resource center.
And just there's tons of good material there. You know, just take a look at that. And the documents are quite easy to read, and they've got super graphics as well.
And here's that graphic that brings up the very question. How many different cloud service providers in your state? See, we didn't ask platform, infrastructure, software. Look at this. 3 states at 99 clouds. I guess that'd be a question for everybody on this call here. I mean, how many clouds do you have? You know?
The intercloud stuff. That's the fun part. I've got another question for you. So we basically took a look at presentations, and we've got the cloud service providers. Sorry, I'm just getting, okay. Concept of cyber insurance by NASCIO members. Did I have that?
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Well, yeah, we did ask that question. I have to go pull that report. It's in one of our annual surveys, but yes, there's issues with that though.
Okay.
See, when a cyber insurance was first offered, companies really didn't know what to charge. Now they're starting to say, you know, we didn't charge enough. Or they're saying, you know, based on your event history, we're not going to insure you. So it's not a solution. And by the way, once data is stolen, once our citizens' data is stolen, you can't get it back. Now, here's another angle on this thing, Bob. Some data, this is again, the importance of the chief data officer. Some data is being stolen and they can't break into it because it's protected by some cipher, okay?
Yep.
But they're counting on, they're putting it in escrow. The bad guys are putting it in escrow, anticipating the arrival of quantum computing capabilities that will break the cipher. So in other words, they're saying, well, we got the data, it's encrypted, but we'll get the data in 5 years. Now,
Yep.
people are saying quantum in 10 years. What do you think, Bob? I'm thinking sooner than that.
I think it's already there in some places. And when you're looking at the resources of some of the actors that are stealing the data, they're really quite.
And they have resources. They can outspend us.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's just like I said, it's just a function of time. So do your homework, do your architecture, and get it sorted out so you don't have to pay to the cyber people. And it's like fire insurance. A lot of organizations say, okay, we're not going to pay because the rates are so high. We're not going to pay cyber insurance. We'll just take the hit and pay there. Just take a look at that aspect as well.
Sure. And consider it this way, Bob, risk management.
Yep.
As you said, are you going to absorb it? You're going to transfer it? What are you going to do to mitigate it? Very careful, very, very careful strategizing. Now, we don't have a position on any of these approaches at NASCIO. We're just saying, well, this is what states are doing. But I will say the cyber insurance field has changed. The fees have changed because we've learned, the reason the insurance companies didn't know what to charge for it, they didn't have anything to compare it to.
Whereas now they got, unfortunately, too much to compare.
Now they got a history. Yep.
That's right. We got 2 more questions.
Okay.
We've got what U.S. state is probably the leader or gold standard for their digital transformation efforts? Can you answer that?
They're all doing something. Okay. We're interviewing a number of states, and I don't know that there is a gold standard. But I will say, who has published their roadmap and their approach? State of Texas has done extensive work here that's published. Some states are not publishing, okay? But state of Texas has, okay? So I would look there. And by the way, we're going to make reference to that. We're going to be writing a report on this this year, and we'll put links to, what resources are out there. But some cases I have state CIOs say, here's my roadmap, but don't share it.
No, that's super. Well,
Yeah.
Like I said, and Texas is the second largest state, population wise, and well, they're the largest state if you ask them, but it's nothing's bigger than Texas. But fantastic presentation on the use of personas and journey mapping. What might you say to those organizations that skip this all together in order to deliver more on time?
Well, that's always the struggle, isn't it? Now, I'm trying to remember. There is the Project Management Institute, and they published the 7 sins of project management. We did a whole webinar on that, by the way. One of them is watch out for these deadlines. Are they valid? Like I put this time on this project. Where'd that come from? There's supposed to be this ongoing continuing embellishment of project plans. Maybe your timeline is way off. Maybe it's off by a little bit, but on time, I think is I'm really cautious about on time. Maybe you're delivering it too early, but the point is putting in the necessary requirements and capabilities. That's part of that business case. What are we saying we're going to do with this project? And I think business cases have to be dynamic. We might learn something new. That's like you and I've talked before, Bob. If you meet anybody who says they know everything about enterprise architecture, you better make a 180-degree turn and run for your life. Nobody knows everything about anything. Things are changing so fast, and that goes with projects as well. We don't know everything about a project at the very beginning when we're defining it and scoping it. We have to go back to that right out of the PMI, continual project embellishment. And so I'd say the personas, it's a technique, it's an approach to try to be sure, are we in fact empathizing and understanding our citizen experience? So personas like, I'm moving back to state because my parents are here and I need to take care of my parents. So I need to find a job, or I need to find a house. Those personas help formulate a perspective. And then if you know that perspective and you've got these digital capabilities we're talking about, you'd say, okay, Bob, we're going to help you find a house. Okay, Bob, here's a house near your parents. And given your capabilities, these are potential employers for you. Now, that's one example. Another would be women with infant children. Okay, they come in to one agency and say, here's my circumstance. And that agency says, you know what, given your circumstance, persona, you should have these services already, and we're going to go ahead and enroll you for them. See, that's they help with journey mapping. They help with human-centered design. Okay.
I would, yes, I fully agree. Basically, a lot of it is pay me now or pay me later.
Okay. And I don't want to require citizens or residents to know how our state is organized. How are they going to know who they should call? You know, and some states are saying, you know, we're teaming up with federal and state government in future because they may not even know what level of government they need to be dealing with. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. No. Yeah. I fully agree. If you skimp on the business architecture, just from an interesting perspective, is that the Economist, the British magazine, is basically the editors. Two of their editors basically came out with a statistic of 94% failure rate in government IT projects. Skipping over a key step in the value chain is not going to help you. That's my personal.
I'm going to also bring up something else. What is a project failure? You know, that is a curious notion because, in fact, getting back to what we said earlier about your learning, even as the project is on the runway, you're building this aircraft, okay, and you learn something like the timeline's not right. The scope is not right. The budget was way underdone. And by the way, we left off records management. We left off security. We left off enterprise architecture. We left off data management. You know, we left off all these things. In fact, we left off marketing and communication of the effort. Once we deliver a capability, is it going to get adopted? Did we put that in the budget? So failure, well, you missed. Well, you know, maybe the scope or the business case wasn't really done. And then the other aspect is we learned something. So I'm really suspect when I hear about project failure.
I fully agree with your cynicism. I basically say 60% might be right, 94% is a bit over the top. But like you said, the criteria.
Unless you've done a project exactly like it before, you're not going to be very good at estimating. I mean, that goes for bridges and highways as well, you know?
Yep. I was a civil engineer in the previous life, and you know.
And I used to put in utility distribution lines. So
exactly, you know, life happens. Well, listen, Eric, thank you ever so much for taking the time to present.
Glad to be here.
And all I can say to attendees, go to NASCIO.org, take a look at the resources they have there. They're really good. Okay, for that. And anyways, whatever. I thank you again for presenting. That was super. Now what happens is I'm going to be soon closing the recording. What I want you to understand is that right now, as we're going into the stream sessions right now, we have a stream session on digital transformation where Dr. James Denford is going to be giving a global assessment of national AI policies. Okay. Dr. Stenio Fernandez is going to be talking about digital transformation and innovation value streams. And then we've got Sahar Nazami Tafreshi. She's going to be talking about establishing an analytics strategy and practice. That will be followed by a quick coffee break. And then we'll have Dennis Suzar from the United Nations presenting the UN e-government survey overview. Dorothy Ang talking about the Code for Canada, which is an NGO which gets people ready to help. And we were talking about human resources. They're the ones that are basically helping provide you resources, and they're teaming up with trainers. And then Eric Baladas is going to be talking about data fluency at the Bank of Canada and a learner-centric approach to basically get these services not just created, but used throughout the organization. So thank you very much for attending. Eric, thank you again. This was great. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm going to ask everybody to go to the next session.
Thanks, Bob. Okay.
You're very welcome.